This is Anthony Pascal.
And this is Laurie Elster, and this is the All Access Star Trek podcast. Today we have a special treat. We have an interview with John de Lancie, who I had never spoken to before until we talked to him. I think you've interviewed him before, right?
Yeah, a couple times.
Yeah.
He seemed to remember me, so that was good.
That's nice. He didn't remember me because we'd never met. But we've got some news first, and some more business news, which is sort of interesting even to me, because more bidders, well, not bidders, more people interested in buying Paramount. So this time it's Byron Allen's company, who I remember him from 1970s, co-host of the show Real People.
Right. Like, some people are surprised to think that guy owns a $4 billion media company, but he does. I think it's
he's been busy. Like that I knew. Yeah,
he owns the Weather Channel and some other stuff. So he's put in a bid for all of Paramount, all the shares, and the debt, like $30 billion, which is money he doesn't have, but he says he can get it. And the market really rallied on this. Paramount has the board has formed a special committee to look at bids. So it's getting serious now. Reading analysts and trades, there's some skepticism. Byron Allen, like he's previously offered to buy ABC, and he basically he offers to buy everything, and he doesn't necessarily end up buying it. So sometimes he does, sometimes he doesn't. This is a pretty big, maybe the biggest thing he said he wants to buy. But he tried to buy just BET last year, and that fell apart. So What's interesting is he and his company are interested in the things that most people aren't interested in.
You know what? I noticed that too. Like he's interested in Paramount Plus and TV. Right.
He's
but
mostly, he's mostly interested in the cable channels, and because he has some cable channels and stuff. And he isn't just interested in the studio or the lot. But it sounds like the way he would finance his deal is he would essentially do a fire sale on everything else, including selling off certain intellectual property and also physical property, like the lot in Hollywood, which is, so I kind of hope this doesn't happen. It does sound like things are still moving along with Skydance, and they're kind of negotiating a price. I still think that's going to be the most likely outcome, but assuming Sherry can finally agree to it, Sherry Redstone, who has a controlling stake, someone's going to buy Paramount this year. We just don't know who it is, but the stock's up another 10% or something this week. So the market feels something. I mean, analysts are saying the inherently shares of this company are worth $30. They're currently trading at like $16 or something like that. It's being held down by debt and some other issues, but there's value. There's a lot of value kind of inside of Paramount that can be unlocked by the right buyer. So that's going to happen, I think.
All right.
But before that happens, the company's going to keep on making stuff because they can't stop making stuff.
No, and they've just started making the Section 31 movie is now officially in production. They started on Tuesday of this week in Toronto.
Well, I think they actually started on Monday. Paramount officially announced it on Tuesday and released the picture. And when our earlier reporting said they were going to start on Monday, and the way things work and how long it takes the Paramount press office to get something approved, I'm pretty sure they started on Monday. They just announced it on Tuesday.
Right. Well, they said it started today in their announcement.
That's... I'm saying
anyway,
I think they started on Monday.
I'm not disbelieving you. I'm only reporting what was in the press release.
Fine,
but they also finally announced 7 cast members, which we hadn't known anyone else who was in it. We had no other names. So I actually don't know most of these people. I know Sam Richardson from Ted Lasso.
Well, the headline is they're all new. There isn't a single name here. Like, people were expecting, like, are they going to, Shazad Latif or Mary Chieffo or, Jason Isaacs or, God, I'm forgetting, but who played my guy? Who played Carl again? The guy from CSI?
Paul
Guilfoyle. Right.
Guilfoyle,
Yeah, so none of those names are on the list. Now, doesn't mean that there aren't any known Trek actors that they just haven't told us about, but these are all new characters, new actors to Star Trek, which is interesting.
Yeah, and mostly new to me.
Yeah, I mean, I knew it's like most of them are people that I kind of recognize. They all have good, solid careers. Sam Richardson, he did win an Emmy. I know him especially from the show Veep. He's very funny. You don't cast Sam Richardson unless it's funny, I think. So that means that there is some lightness to this show about a dark, nefarious secret intelligence operation run by a former mirror universe emperor,
right.
But there's laughs, right?
Sure.
So that's good to hear, though. I mean, she described it as Guardians of the Galaxy type thing, so
which is rompy and fun.
Yeah, and I hope that's that it is fun. People just have to get past the she ate a Kelpian or two back in her day.
She had slaves and ate them thing.
Yeah. She feels bad about it.
A lot of people and,
but
stuff like that.
Who hasn't? I mean, really.
Well, we'll see. Filming should take about 6 weeks, which we already knew. And we'll keep you guys posted as soon as we find out anything else about this. As soon as they start shooting on location, someone will start getting pictures and leaking them. So we'll find out.
They released one picture. It's just her with the clapperboard on a set. If you look closely, it kind it's almost certainly a former Discovery set that they've redressed.
Yeah, why not?
It is shooting in Toronto. We know it is shooting, where Discovery was, and they're probably using as much of that stuff as they could.
Yeah, that's what I would do.
And then that stuff, when they're done with this movie in March, is going to quickly transition to Starfleet Academy.
Right.
And get redressed yet again.
That's Star Trek for you.
Exactly.
All right. So moving on to Star Trek Picard. Dave Blass did an interview with Warp Factor Trek and talked about legacy again, because everyone always asks. And basically, said what we know, but said, it's a nice idea. And he said there's literally zero development on it. It is not secretly in development. It's not happening right now. Paramount Plus is deep into production with the other shows. And he said, even if it gets greenlit, which it hasn't been, the same thing that we've been saying, nothing could even start until 2025.
Yeah, from a filming point of view.
Right.
If that were to happen. Yeah, this is definitely different than Michelle Hurd, is basically they're going to make Section 31 and then they're going to make Academy and then they're going to do this as if she was just being optimistic about it. He was much more realistic, but he talked about how he really wants it to happen, how everyone wants it to happen. He was just being realistic. And we're going to get into this. De Lancie kind of said the same thing.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
When we get into our interview with him. There's some good stuff in that interview. You should just read it. Mostly about his work on season 2 and season 3. So he's such a great guy. And
yeah, no, he's lovely.
He's not working on any of the new shows, but hopefully he will be back on Star Trek if Terry ever gets his hands on Star Trek.
Yeah, well, he will be if Terry gets his hands on it.
Speaking of Terry and all those Picard people, this weekend is the Saturn Awards. Terry's going to be there. Picard is up for 7 nominations. Strange New Worlds and Lower Decks are also up for nominations. But they also announced a special Lifetime Achievement Award for the cast of Next Generation, most of whom are going to be there.
Yeah, LeVar Burton and Jonathan Frakes can't be there, but it looks like everyone else, including Marina and Will Wheaton, everybody, Patrick, Brent, Gates, Michael Dorn, whole gang.
Just as a side note, the Saturn people said Frakes was filming, and so I'm wondering if he's shooting, because we know he's going to shoot an episode this season of Strange New Worlds. Could be that's what he's doing. Here's
why I think you're right. Because when I did my panel for Trek Talks and we were chatting before we went live, I think he and Catherine were talking something, just like timing, or did you get the script, or are you coming soon, or something like that. So that would work scheduling wise.
It's great that Will's going to be, Marina has to come over from the UK. So I'm excited because I'm going to be there.
I'm jealous. It's going to be so fun. Hopefully I'll get to talk to all of them on the red carpet or somewhere, but it should be a fun show, I think. I mean, William Shatner's going to be there presenting Seth MacFarlane with a big award, too, for being a trailblazer. Like, there's just going to be a lot of fun stuff going on. I mean, Amanda Plummer's nominated. I wonder if she's going to show up.
Oh, she's not going to show up. Lee Majors, you get the list of people who are going to be there. From a media alert, Lee Majors and Lindsay Wagner are going to be there.
I'm so jealous. I've been on a Bionic Woman binge because I got the Blu-ray set for Christmas. So I'm making my way through that. And then I just watched $6 Million Man with John de Lancie and one with William Shatner. But I love Bionics. I love them.
Now, the award for the Next Generation cast is going to be presented by Kevin Feige. Yeah. Who's, kind of an important guy in Hollywood.
Yep. No, there's like big non-Trek names are going to be at this thing. Like Keanu's getting a big award. Jodie Foster's going to be there. Christopher Nolan. Like it's, there's a lot going on. And if you want to watch it, it'll be live streamed at electricnow.tv. We have a link on the site too.
Speaking of streaming, there's a transition. The Super Bowl is going to be streamed on Paramount Plus and it air on CBS roughly a week after this podcast launches on the Sunday. And Paramount Plus has a Super Bowl commercial, which they released early. And of course, Super Bowl commercials are supposed to be big and flashy and expensive. And this one pretty much is because it's more of the Paramount Mountain thing where they're all on a mountain and it's lots of celebrities, but it's all led by Sir Patrick Stewart.
Yeah, he's the star of it. He's the narrator. He gets to be silly.
Yes.
I mean, I thought it was, at first I watched it, I was like, what? It's so weird. Like, I was like, whoever wrote this was really high. And then it's just fun. I think it's super fun.
Right, because it's half animated characters. He suggests there's like a Super Bowl quarterback there from the Dolphins, and he's trying to throw something, and Patrick Stewart suggests he throws Arnold from Hey Arnold because his head is shaped like a football. I thought it was fun, and then he and Drew Barrymore get an argument.
I love when he yells at her, which is funny, and when he kisses Arnold gently on the head before he throws him. I don't know. It was very wacky. Some of our team didn't love it, but I have to say, actually,
and the band Creed is there. The band Creed is there randomly, Creed,
and then Patrick Stewart's singing along. I watched it again right before we started recording, and I thought it was funny. I liked it.
Yeah, I mean, it was amusing. It's fine for a Super Bowl commercial. It shows that Paramount is supporting or Paramount Plus still, so they haven't run out of money entirely. These things are very expensive.
Yes. They also could have chosen someone else to head it up, and they got Patrick Stewart.
Yeah. Now, I was a little disappointed that they didn't trek him up in any. I mean, the joke was they put him in an old-fashioned football outfit with leather helmet. But when he throws the football, there's a sound effect, and it's from the $6 Million Man.
Yes,
which makes no sense.
It's the bionic sound.
Right. Like, that's when you have like a you just do a subtle transporter sound or something. But I don't know.
I don't know if there's a sound for that particular action. But yeah, it was strange. But it is interesting to me that he was in it because he officially doesn't have anything new coming out on their channel.
Well, that's true, but I mean, there's stuff in they had the guy who plays Dingle from Reno 911, and that show's been off for years.
No,
right?
They've had specials. They've come back. They've done stuff.
Yeah, but there's nothing coming. I don't think there's any new Reno 911. It's just that he's a funny guy, and they put him in.
Yeah, I used to work with him. He's also super nice.
But they had a lot, they had plenty of new stuff. They had Master Chief in there from the Halo show and stuff. It would have been fun if they did get Pike in there. They had Pike in there last year.
Yeah.
I guess they wanted to change it up a little bit.
Now, another Starship captain we can talk about is William Shatner, whose documentary, William Shatner, You Can Call Me Belle, has a date. It's coming out on his birthday, his 93rd, actually.
Which is March 22nd.
Yes, the day before mine. Just saying, everybody could start shopping.
I mean, this thing has been out there kind of for a while. They did a panel. I was at the panel Comic-Con 2022. They did the circuit of, it was, I think it's South by Southwest last year.
Yeah, they did South by Southwest, and it's been on the festival circuit. But now there's a full trailer. They're planning to release it theatrically. They're saying so you can pre-order tickets, and they have, you can pre-order a bunch because they obviously want a lot of people to get them. You can get a special pin that you pay extra for, but they haven't booked it into theaters specifically yet. So what they're saying on their site is like holds a place for you, I guess. And then if it doesn't come to your town or you can't go, you can get a refund.
Yeah, it's a complicated distribution. They're trying to do it themselves. It's this company called Legion M, which is a fan-funded company. The film was fan-funded, but it's different than Kickstarter in that it's actually you buy shares in all of their projects. And they've released a few things, but I guess they're just doing things differently and weirdly, I guess. But in a way, a lot of documentaries don't get a theatrical release. This sounds like I'm not sure you'd call this a wide release, but a lot of documentaries don't even get a theatrical release. They just go straight to streaming or, TV.
Right.
So in the end, I think that's how most people will end up seeing this. I don't think it's going to have a massive wide release all across the country.
No, but if it's in New York, then Brian and I'll go.
But it's Canada and the USA for now.
Because he's very Canada and the USA.
Exactly.
As am I. So there you go. And we have a little bit of movie news, non-news, from our friend Zoe Saldana, who was out there promoting a Paramount Plus series that she's working on. And of course, someone asked her about Trek. And basically, she's like, yeah, I've read the trades also, which is where she got her updates. But then she said, they're still hoping to grab all of us veterans for one more go-round, and I would love to do it.
I think that the bit about the trades was the recent announcement that there is another movie, and she's saying, that would be younger people, and basically it wouldn't involve them. But she's like, and they still want to do one with us, which would be the last one, and she really wants to do it.
Yeah.
So there we go. There's theoretically 2 Star Trek movies in development.
Sure.
That's what, yeah. Not counting, I mean, this would be theatrical Paramount Pictures movies. And then you've got the Section 31 streaming movie, which, by the way, I would not be surprised if they snuck a brief theatrical release of that.
Oh, yeah.
Like a 1 weekend Fathom events kind of thing or something like that. But nonetheless, Paramount Pictures, which is, in a different part of town of LA from where decisions about streaming stuff is made, is still talking about making Star Trek movies. They just need to start actually making one. Right. And I think a lot of fans are like, let us know when cameras are rolling at this point.
They're like, I don't want to hear any more news. I don't need any updates from people who are speculating. Just once, when everybody's at work, call me. All right. Well, I think we should get to our interview with Mr. John de Lancie.
Yeah, we're going to start off talking about FanFair, which we've talked about on this pod, which was launched by his son, which is that kind of virtual signature thing. And then about 15 minutes in, we're going to get to some Star Trek stuff.
Have a listen.
We'd like to welcome John de Lancie. This is your first time on the All Access Star Trek podcast. You need no introduction. You're a legend. Welcome, John de Lancie.
Thank you. But my pleasure. Absolutely, truly my pleasure.
Well, thank you so much for coming. We want to start because you're here to talk about this company that you and your son have put together called FanFair Signatures. So let's start with that because I don't think everybody knows what it is.
Well, FanFair actually came out of the pandemic, and that is Owen, my son, who up until then had studied to be an architect, and then, interestingly enough, began to create, let's just call them maps, but they were kind of designer maps that became very popular. And so some of the biggest ones that he created were like for lobbies, 24 feet tall and 65 feet long, and on and on and on. And so he already had a lot of printing experience. And so he called me up one day and he said, wow, this pandemic is lasting a lot longer than we all wanted it to. I guess you're not going to be going to conventions or anything. And I said, no, that's pretty much out of the question. he said, I think I might be able to do something for people who can't go and what have you. So he explained to me the idea. And I said, well, and I was the usual dad, stick in the mud sort of dad. Well, I don't know if anybody would be interested. And, well, I don't know. That doesn't sound and stuff like that. And he goes, look, can I just prove it to you? Can you give me an opportunity to prove, proof of concept? I said, sure. So about 3 months later, he said, by the way, remember that conversation that we had? And I said, yeah. He said, well, I set up a website for you, and I began designing actual posters. And you have, I don't know what it was at the time, but a couple of hundred people who are interested. And I went, oh, okay. He said, do you think that you might be able to get some of your friends involved? So I said, sure. And I talked to the usual suspects, as it were. And so I said, but you have to go through Paramount. We're all a little too well known here to do it under the radar. So that's what he did. And he's designed these things. And of course, they are virtual signatures. They are exactly what the person, Bob might send me. I might get, the order, which comes up on my iPad, and it might say, it goes to Bob, and Bob wants to write, happy birthday, Brian, or happy birthday, from Q, or, see you out there, or the trial never ends. And so I write that. It's sent over, and it is printed, framed. In some instances, depending on what they want, what the person wants, it can be framed and what have you. I just sent it to somebody who said, oh my God, I had no idea. And I was actually at a convention a couple of, I don't know, let's say a year ago. And somebody brought me one because it was the first time I saw it. I went, oh, these are really nice. And I was a little concerned about what the signatures would look like. And they're better than the ones in which I do. Just with a felt pen, because they're more imprinted, and I write each and every one of them. There's no, it isn't like a stamp or anything like that. And each personalization is to what that person wants. So they've been successful. Now this company is beginning to move out into the sports world, into a bunch of different places where autographs are good, and people are reacting very well.
There hasn't been much of a learning curve, because it's different than traditional autographs. There is a difference, but you're not, you're finding that people kind of get it, what it is.
Yes, people get it. Probably the most sort of heartfelt part about all of this is that there are hundreds, many, many, many hundreds of people. People will say, I've always been a big fan of the show, but I'm not such a big fan as to be somebody who's going to spend the money to go to a convention.
Right.
The cost of the airline ticket, the cost of the hotel, the cost of going into the event itself, then, blah, 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 blah. He said, this gives me access and an opportunity to have something personalized from you without being there. So we began to see that as like a crack, an area. Now, some of them are very extreme. I live in Tasmania. Or in some instances, they're more complicated. My health is such that I can't do it, and so there's a demographic which is served by these, which nobody really expected.
Since you're personalizing these, what's the most requested line that people are asking you to sign?
Well, the most requested is "The trial never ends," and I think it's a great line because that line works for so many people. I just did one for somebody who said, this is for my father, and he is he's taken this new job as, principal or superintendent of a school. And could you write for him, "The trial never ends"? I went, perfect. Yeah, it's such an applicable line to so many situations. See you out there is a big one, and also there are many that just are. Sometimes they're these are lines that I said once, and quite frankly I don't remember them anymore. But some of them have to do with extending yourself. I mean, I guess there were some lines I said to Picard. It's more than just stars and nebula out there. It's an exploration of yourself. Forgive me, I don't know what the actual line is, but I go, oh, that's interesting. This is being sent to somebody who's being the sender is trying to encourage that person to be more risky in life.
Yeah. Of course, this is open ended. They could have you say anything.
There's sometimes there are requests that I go, I'm not sure where this is going, but they know, and then some of them are really congratulations on your master's degree, or
right.
And most people get them so that they're quite large, set up to be hung up with framed, mounted, glass, the whole 9 yards.
Yeah, I mean, it's all original artwork. I'm curious, though, is there an option to, or have you guys considered also just doing kind of the old-fashioned, just like headshots or, publicity photos that you sign?
I don't think Owen wants to do that. He said that has been done. Each person who's involved, Bob, Brent, Jonathan, I think is up there now. Every one of them have spent a fair amount of time with Owen saying, this is sort of what I'd like. I know in one instance, Brent said, I always loved Harold Lloyd. I'd love to do something with the clock. It feels so right for me. In the same thing for myself, you can get my headshot anywhere.
Right.
So these are unique to and specific.
I mean, you mentioned branching out a little into other areas. Are there other fandoms that you're going to try and bring aboard?
What about Star Wars or other sci-fi? And what about other Star Trek actors? I think you recently announced George Takei is joining. Is that right?
Yes, George is, and you were saying it's not like other things and what have you. It's interesting. And I guess I was a good example, being the first person who was pitched the idea, who was saying, well, I don't know, and stuff like that. The older you are, the less you kind of understand the idea. And so the younger you are, the people who he has who are going on, the younger they are, they go, oh, yeah, I'll get that. Oh, perfect. Done.
Right.
And George, I'm sitting over with George and Owen and what have you. And he's going, well, I just don't, how does that work? So I would go, George, I went through the exact same thing. It's not that the person comes up to you. That's what we're used to, right? Yes, right. And they're holding a picture, right? This is done virtually. So they have already gone up and they've gone, oh, I really love that poster of George. I want to get that, and I want to get it framed, and I want it this size and what have you. And then I want it to say whatever he's going to say. That, and then George, that comes on the iPad right here. You see? He goes, oh yeah, there it is. That's right. And then you sign it. And then you press this button, and then it goes through Owen to the printers. And and depending on where in the world this person is, it's printed in their region. So there's the EU, there's Southeast Asia. It's printed in that region.
In a way, I likened it when I first saw it. I'm like, oh, this is kind of like Cameo in that you get a personalized thing, except instead of a video, you get a poster with the personalized thing.
Correct. And as Owen keeps on saying, and it's something that you have up there and you put up on your wall, and it's concrete, whereas a video is at best on your phone and you have to show it.
Right.
You mentioned the trial never ends, so I'm going to use that as a awkward transition to talk to you a little bit about the last time you were on Star Trek, which was the series finale of Picard, which was kind of a shock and a surprise to everyone. Can you talk to us a little bit about how Terry came to you for that and what he explained was going on in that scene and what it all meant?
When I dealt with season 2, I began, you say yes, and the story is not really set up yet. Can we write a story that includes you is really what the question is. And then you sign a contract, which is saying yes, and, you'll be used, whatever it is, 5 times, or I forget what the numbers were. And as time went on, I began going, why? Am I dying? And how is that? I don't understand how that's possible. I'm not adverse to it. I'm just concerned about it because we're talking about an audience that is exceedingly on point about the show. They don't miss anything. And I believe what's going to happen is that they're going to be watching, and then this is going to be kind of revealed to them, and they're going to break with the show, as it were, and turn to the person that they're watching the show with. I'm imagining this, of course, and say, but wait a minute, how's that possible? He's immortal. And then they're going to come back to the show. And I said, I was thinking the same thing. And if that's where we're going with this, it seems that Star Trek should do what Star Trek does best about philosophical issues. And I don't know of a bigger philosophical issue than dying, that we should deal with it and not just, it's not like a soap opera where, all of a sudden the character doesn't come back. So I spoke to Terry about it quite a bit. And when we were filming the last episode, the last scene, or at least in my head, the last scene of just Picard and I, the goodbye scene in Picard, because, you mean something to me scene.
You're talking about season 2.
I'm talking about season 2.
Right. Okay.
When that scene was over, that just, if you can imagine, that was a scene in a little cul-de-sac of the stage, beautifully dressed scene, and there were just 2 chairs in there, and then and of course that area was lit, but everything where the cameras was not lit, and so when we started shooting, I would say that there was the camera crew, and there were at least 2 cameras rolling at all times. So there was, 4 or 5 people, so 10 plus people over in Video Village. Let's say altogether there would have been 12, 15 people, but I couldn't see them. But when we finished that scene, which was 45 minutes later, let's do it this angle, let's do it this angle, and stuff like that. All of a sudden, there was an explosion of applause. The lights went on, and there were 30 or 40 people there, people who had come to watch this last scene between Patrick and I. Patrick made a little speech. I made a little speech. And Terry came up to me at that point and said, "You're coming back." And I figured out how to do it. And I went, great. And I had the presence of mind after so many years in the business to not say, well, how? What do you mean? Explain it to me. I said, that's great. That's great. So it wasn't until 8 months later that, I got a thing saying, okay, it's time. And so I looked at the scene a couple of days before and went on, and we just shot it. And the costume was fantastic. All of the costumes for me. Christina in season 2, and I'm the gentleman's name has just popped out of my head for season for that last costume for season 3, where I kind of looked like somebody from off of Mount Olympus. Were terrific, and the lighting was terrific, and we did the whole thing in, I don't know, a half an hour.
Did you know it was going to be a, quote, post-credit scene? That this was going to be...
Yes, I did know that. Yes.
So was it explained to you that this was a possible setup to something else, I guess is the question.
Well, most post-credit scenes are. So
right.
I took it as that. In reading it, I went, oh, well, there it is. There's the baton for, the next, there's the jump off for the next show. I don't think at this point it will happen. There was a fun period of time that it looked like it could happen, but then there was the writer's strike, which took a lot of people's attentions away. I don't think that they expected that season 3 was going to be as well received, as good, let's just say, and as well received. They had already decided on another show, I think, or they were already moving in another direction. So, but it was certainly a really valiant and well appreciated finale to the next generation.
So, if things did happen, if Terry called you tomorrow and said, "We are doing this legacy show, we're going to do the next one," what would you like Q's involvement to be? What would you tell him?
Well, my involvement has always been as a catalyst, as a disruptor, as a character that pushes the envelope and makes everybody hopefully learn something, push forward. That's one. Two, I think that the character works best, and also its position in Star Trek works best if what I bring are big philosophical issues. I think that's when we do the best work. And I have gone back to look at some of those early episodes, and I realized some of them were great fun. I certainly bring an energy, or brought an energy, which was unique to the show. But the shows that I think worked the best were the ones that Tapestry, All Good Things, the one about suicide. Those were the shows that, at least for me, and I think for the fans, had the most resonance.
You've mentioned many times, the story of on the set with Gene during Farpoint, saying, this is going to change your life. And of course it has, but there's so many guest stars. There's hundreds of everyone in Hollywood worked on Star Trek in the 90s. But why did he single you out? Like, did he ever talk to you about how because Q is such a quintessential Roddenberry character. He's like the ultimate Gene Roddenberry type of character. Like, did he ever tell you where he saw the character going through the series and how often he'd come back and what he wanted to do with it?
No. I was brought to him through Leonard Maislish. I was doing a play. My agents gave me a call, say, you have an audition for Star Trek. It's tomorrow at 4:30. I go, I'm in the middle of the rehearsing of a play at the Mark Caper, which it's a major theater. And I was the, co-lead in the play, and I couldn't just walk away. So I didn't go to that audition. The next week she called me and she said, there's a producer who keeps calling for you. What if we made the audition at your lunchtime? So I only had an hour to rush up there, do the audition, walk in. All these people were there. I do the audition. I walk out, and a guy walks out with me, puts his hand on my shoulder. You make my words sound better than they are. I said, you must be the writer. He said, I'm Gene Roddenberry. I had no idea who that was. And now I am making a beeline for the front door because I have to be back at rehearsals. And there's this little guy who stops me to say, they're going to hire you. I said, okay. you hear these things as actors all the time. They're going to hire you. Yeah. And this is a payback. I said, what? And he said, about 4 years ago, I was flat on my back with a quadruple bypass operation. And every day, and the minute he said every day, I knew where he was going. You made me laugh when I thought I was going to die. And that's because he watched me on this soap opera. And I had created this very popular character on the soap opera. And that was it. So we went through the whole routine about, but that was my association. And they made the decision. And then I come on. And after 3 days of shooting, now the dailies are coming in. That's when Gene comes up to me and says, you have no idea what you've gotten yourself into. So I took that simply as a compliment that they liked what I was doing. They were seeing the dailies. They saw we started shooting the trial scene, and they liked it. About a week later, when now I'm beginning to, spread my wings a little bit more, he comes up to me and he said, I'm going to have you on the show 6 times a year. I said, oh, well, great.
Gene says this to you.
Gene said this to me. But again, you have to understand, I'm just the guest star. Yeah. I have no position. There's nobody, I'm not contracted to be written for. Very different. If you're a regular, they might not even like you, but they're contracted to write for you. Nobody's contracted to write for me. So I take all of these things with a grain of salt. So I am in fact brought back for the next show. And Gene comes up to me and he said, I know I said to you that I was going to have you come back 6 times, but I can't really do that, which made complete sense to me because, and I took it from a very personal point of view. I had played Romeo and Juliet. I played Romeo in Romeo and Juliet twice. And there is something the air really goes out of the balloon when Mercutio dies. For the audience, they go, oh my God, he's so much fun, and he comes on, and da-da-da-da-da. But as the guy who's playing Romeo, you kind of go, okay, well, Mercutio's dead now. And this is where the heavy lifting starts, okay? So I thought of my character as sort of a Mercutio. Right. He comes in, he's this, he's that, it's 1, 2, 3, ha, 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 and off I go. Well, that's sort of a drag for those who have to be around that all the time. And right. So that's when Gene said, I actually can't bring you back because then it'll become just, the merry adventures of Q. So I ended up coming back 6 times out of 7 years, 1 time each time.
Were you surprised every time you got the call?
I was surprised enough to go, oh, okay. And certainly never counted on it, and never thought about it. That was the other thing. People would ask me, well, what would you? I go, listen, guys, this is like being concerned about somebody else's dinner party and whether you are going to be invited. Well, that's a really kind of shitty type of life to live in. You just don't want it. If as a parent, I would tell or as a friend to a friend, I would say, no, you don't want to get involved in that type of stuff. If you get invited, that's great. And if you don't get invited, just move on. So I really never thought about it.
But yet, it obviously Q is an iconic character, very associated with the show. I'm curious, when they switched to the feature films, were there ever any talks about you being in any of them?
Listen, not to me. And I dare say probably there was probably some talks about let's not have him in it. But I have no idea. I have no idea. And I never, actually, Terry, when I came to Paramount to talk with him, about Picard, he said, "Well, I guess you were expecting this phone call." And I said, "You know what, Terry? Not at all, not at all." He goes, "Well, how's that possible?" I said, "Well, there are a lot of movies between that I didn't get called on. So no, my experience is such that you guys call when you. I don't think about the show. So no, I didn't expect anything."
So going back into the history a little bit, in one of your early, I think your third episode of Next Generation, it's you and Patrick Stewart and Whoopi Goldberg getting this scene together where Q and Guinan are encountering each other, and she does, this famous move with her hands, and there's some antagonism there. Did you two or three talk about what that conflict was? Did you give yourselves any kind of backstory?
Yes. And that's truly actor spin. The scene was not, it was an okay scene, but it wasn't quite a really great scene. So, I don't, quite literally, I went, "Woo," and she went, "Woo." That would get us past some bumpy roads, some couple bumpy speeches in there, knowing that the audience, flashing, "Oh, it's flashing over here. Look at this light over here. Here's a little smoke over here." And it was just never thinking that the audience would take off and be go, "Oh, what was that all about?" It was just an actor way of getting past a little problem. Just where you kind of go, "Oh, it doesn't quite explain itself here, but, we can do a little smoke and mirrors and make the scene work."
And create speculation for years to come.
Absolutely.
You were just talking about the character of Q and how, why Gene didn't constantly bring him back. What's interesting is for season 2, Akiva brought you in to essentially be there for half the episodes, more than half, I think. And so. Did that shock you? And did you pause to say a little Q goes a long way? And, do we want this much in one season? Or did you relish the idea of getting to play this arc?
Well, a little of both. I think part of my expectation was that it was going to be more one-on-one with Patrick, because that's where the heat has always been. So I was a little quizzical about, I'm off doing this over here and this over here and stuff like that. So that's why I said to you at the beginning of this that I'm kind of a catalyst, and I think that in season 2 I was used more as a catalyst than as an antagonist. So yeah,
this is gonna sound like a criticism, but it's more I want to understand things better, because it's not about you, but Lori and I often talked about what was Q's motivation in season 2. How did they explain that to you? What was his goal?
Well, you have to understand there's not much discussion about, there's not much talk about those things. And I personally don't do all that well with all of that talk anyway. My motivation has always been, I'm going to make you better. A version of that.
Right.
You don't deserve, do you deserve to be out here? You think you deserve to be out here? Well, let's see. And you know what? I'm going to help you along the way. So people will say to me, well, he was a villain. No. And I don't play things as villains or, heroes or stuff like that. I just play them as much as I can about what it is that I'm trying to get across. And I find, just as an actor, all of that motivational talk to be a little, it's good when you're learning lines, but it's not good when you're actually playing. maybe like a tennis game, you go out to win. That might be your motivation, but all of that other stuff. There was not much talk about it, and nor do I actually ask those type of questions. The problem being is that if you start asking those questions, then your performance is looked at by the producers in that way, and I would prefer to be able to fashion it in more personally.
So basically, like, the thing I noticed about your performance in the live action shows that came before that is that the lines are the lines, and you add this comedic spin to them, and you could easily have delivered them in anger or in a different tone. And the comedy, a lot of it comes from the performance. It's not always straight up comedy lines, although you had some great dialogue. But in Lower Decks, it's played for straight up comedy. So was that a different experience for you, or did you bring the same character that you've always had?
Well, I do a lot of voiceovers, and the voiceover world is really quite a unique one, and one that I have a lot of respect for. My training and my approach has always been off the line, as opposed to the ad lib. So, there are a few ad libs here and there and what have you, especially when you don't know the material very well, that you can add. But the voiceover people who do really, really well in the voiceover world also have a great ability to ad lib. Now, when you talk about what I was doing on screen, Corey Allen, who was the director of the Encounter at Farpoint, wanted me to be very straight, very, as far as I was concerned, one note. And I kept on saying to him, I think that there is potential here to mix it up. And I would like to do that, Corey, because I will be more dangerous. I know you want me dangerous, but I will be more dangerous if I am difficult to track. So we went back and forth and what have you. When I went to the second episode, I was on my own at that point. Because when you are in episodic shooting, short of doing something that somebody really doesn't like you to do, as long as it works, they're like, fine, shoot it. Did he say all the words? Good, we're moving on. And so I had already almost been thrown out of Juilliard for spoofing stuff. So this was something that I was familiar with, the undercut. But it all was based on written lines and what the intention was. In Lower Decks, I just went on once. It's just, a few lines here and there. It didn't have the amount of weight and time put into it that the other shows had.
That must have taken, I have to say, because I know how that show was run, and certainly for a pilot episode, that took a lot of guts to tell the director you want to go in a different direction as your first.
Well, I wasn't saying a different direction. I was just saying there are a number of directions to go here. There's a wink and nod here. There's actually, I'm your friend. Bam. Oh, I'm not your friend now. Yeah, there's a rolling out of bed, and I would give this to myself. I would do all my preparatory work and what have you. I knew which way I was going to go. I knew that, but mostly I would put it up into RAM, as it were. I would put a bunch of tools. I could go this way, this way, and then because I was ready to play, I would just allow myself that sort of indulgence, which I think is very Q-like, it depends on how I feel. It depends on how I rolled out of bed today. So if I'm doing the scene and the other actor strikes me as being, this or that, I can go this way and go that way and go that way, which would keep me kind of, in my mind was always, I don't want the audience to go away to make a sandwich. I want them to stay here and watch because they're just not sure where the character is going to be when they come back. So they better watch. So, and we've all seen, how many times have we seen shows and plays or anything where the person comes out and you kind of go, well, I can track this from beginning to end. I just know where this is going to go. And so that was a choice. And I got some of it in. I did get some of it in. But once we got started, then I was untethered, as it were.
Well, it adds a nice unpredictability to the scenes, even when you're reading the lines exactly as everybody has read them.
You got it. I mean, just because it says "I love you" doesn't mean it has to come out "I love you." Right. You could say the words "I love you," but the audience goes, I don't believe them.
Right.
So what you are playing is very different than what you are saying.
I want to wrap up with a question that was actually given to us by one of the writers and producers of one of the Star Trek shows. I told him I was going to talk to you, and he's a huge fan. We learned, Q also represents the continuum, which is a fascinating subject, almost told entirely through your character. And I know you co-wrote a book about the Q and a comic book, so you've put some thought into this. So where do you see the Q nowadays, as it were, years after, and after the Civil War and you had a kid and what lessons have they learned? What lessons are they now trying to impart? What's going on?
I created for myself, without expressing this to anyone until just recently, just maybe in the last couple of years, a very elaborate backstory, because there was no backstory. I would ask Gene. Gene and I had lunch twice. We talked about airplanes. Okay. There was one time when I was shooting with him and he was there, and I said, I would like to reference up. And I don't mean in a religious way, but in a puppet way, that maybe there's somebody who's pulling my string. And he goes, well, let's see it. I said, and it's there. So that was an attempt on my part to go, can we start making this, this is all, understand, Gene wrote this because he was under duress. Oh, we want a movie of the week. That's what we want. We want a movie of the week. And he was like, oh, I want to go straight to episodic. No, we're going to have a movie of the week. So in that first show, Encounter at Farpoint, you can see a very obvious seam between two shows that have been mashed together. And nobody said anything to me about which way they wanted to go or anything else. I brought to that audition, the work that I was doing, playing Raoul Amundsen, who was a huge character. And a scary guy. I brought that to things. So I brought kind of my idea. But nobody then said, oh, well, John, let me tell you about the continuum and let me explain to you about it. And there were no conversations about that whatsoever. But as time went on, I began to go, oh, you know what? I think it would be interesting if I had in my mind where I came from. It isn't like I'm going to play it, but it's just my little secret. And that's when I use Plato's The Cave. The story of the cave is very, most people know the story, the slaves that are chained so that they can only see the back of the cave, and the cave opens out into the sunlight, and you see the shadow, you see something pass the entrance, and it creates a shadow on the cave. In his story, one of the slaves breaks out of the chains, goes out the entrance of the cave, sees the reality, sees the real life, comes back, tells his friends in the cave, and they're so appalled at what he tells them that they kill them. So that's a discussion about human nature.
Right.
I thought, maybe the Q are 7 entities who are chained, and our lives is to witness. We witness the universe, but we witness it as a shadow. But we are there to be witnesses. And that I have broken out, and I too have gone out the entrance of the cave. But in this case, that entrance of the cave then takes me to all of these experiences. So I really do have the experience of having, quote, a friend in Picard. I do have the experience of, Vash and being in love. And I do have, and all of those things. So I went, oh, well, I could kind of work with that. That holds water enough. And since I'm not pitching this story, and since I'm only doing it in my own head, as to why am I here? Why am I here? Well, I'm here to make life better for Picard, but I'm also here to kind of enrich myself, because invariably one of these days I'm going to be told to come back, and I'm going to be shackled to that cave, in that cave, and except I will have seen the real universe. That's my. So I kind of kept that little story in my head for, I don't know, 30, 20 years.
Well, so this is an interesting idea, but there's a whole book series now that's the autobiography of various characters. And a lot of well-known Star Trek writers have tackled these. They've done Janeway and Spock and Sisko and all these different characters. And you're a writer. So if they came to you and said, would you do the autobiography of Q? Is that something you would want to do and have ideas for?
Oh, yes and no. When I worked with Peter David, we had a really good working relationship. I said, Peter, anything that has to do with Q and his inner monologue, I'll handle. And anything that has to do with Trek, you take care of. And so, because I don't know the world well enough. But sure, I'm always interested in stuff. I know we have to close up shop here in a minute. I wanted also to tell you, we're now segueing into a completely different thing, but it's still about Star Trek. I was on tour last year with the Curtis Institute of Music. It's one of the most unique music schools in the world, and only 150 kids go. If you are talented enough to get in, it's free. It's always been free for the last 100 years. My father went there. My father ended up teaching there. He was with the Philadelphia Orchestra, and then he was a director. And I was doing L'Histoire du Soldat, Stravinsky's for 8-city tour. And I was waiting. We were about ready to go on. And I was in the second half of the program. And I had not heard the first half of the program. And a gentleman came up to me, Nick, the Bernardino. And he said, I'm so delighted that you're on this show. You're doing this. I'm a huge Star Trek fan. I said, oh, well, that's nice. He said, and I've written a piece, not quite in honor of me, but to celebrate the fact that you are on the program. I said, oh, that's great. It's called Darmok and Jalad. I had no idea what he was talking about.
Of course you
None. No. I thought he said something about gelato or something. I didn't know about that. And afterwards, I thought, so now they're going on stage, right? And I have another hour at least to sit stewing in the green room. So I thought, I should go out and take a listen to this. I loved it. And new music in the classical music world is a big thing. So afterwards, I said, "Would you be interested in writing some more pieces?" He said, "Absolutely." So I got him and these musicians from Curtis, which is, they're bouncing between, the New York Philharmonic, the Carnegie Hall, whatever. I got them on this cruise that we're doing in 2 weeks, and I've written 2 pieces for them, and they are doing Darmok and Jalad, and which there was a point where I was actually calling it Darmok and Jihad, and they got no. And a brand new piece where I'm going to end up using the people at Roddenberry's were very, very kind to be able to give me a speech that Gene delivered in 1971, which is what I had in mind. What was I trying to do? So we're going to be putting that to music.
That's fantastic.
We're sending someone on the cruise, so we'll make sure that we cover that.
Okay, well, have them come up and talk to me.
Sure. For sure. Is there anything else while we have you that upcoming appearances or shows you're on or anything?
I mean, that has taken up a good 2 months of my life. Quite literally getting up early and writing for 4 or 5 hours every day, and there's that, and there's what Owen is doing, and me getting over COVID.
No, sorry about the COVID.
Wish you the best on that, and you and Owen the best on FanFair. And thank you for your first time on the podcast.
Yeah, thank you.
It's an honor.
Well, thank you. It's a nice conversation, and as usual, I always leave these things thinking I've talked way too much, but I think that was my job. So
yeah, it's 100% your job.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Well, I hope you guys enjoyed listening to that as much as I enjoyed talking to him. That was the longest interview that I've had with him, and we could have kept going, really, to be honest. And
yeah. Oh, no, we had a lot of questions left. I mean, he had somewhere to go. And also he was recovering from COVID. I felt bad about that because I didn't know that. But he has such a great voice, and he's very articulate. And a longer conversation would have been great.
I mean, people are going, we've already hyped it on the site, the stuff that he said about legacy and post-credit scene. I mean, I thought it was interesting how he talked about season 2, reading between the lines. He was kind of saying that he wasn't a huge fan of Q dying, and maybe he was hoping that there'd be more Picard and Q scenes and less Q and Rando's scenes, but he didn't say it that way.
Right.
or am I reading into it?
No, I mean, I thought, he thinks that the strength of Q is Q against Picard and not Q like running off and having shenanigans with other people.
I was interested to hear what he had to say about Roddenberry, and I hadn't heard about this Roddenberry suggesting that he'd come back 6 times a year idea, although I kind of agree, and he agreed that in the end wasn't a good idea, probably.
Yeah. No, it would be too much.
Exactly. They did bring him back once in the first season, though, right?
Yeah, and he came back a bunch, and he was on. I mean, he did one Deep Space Nine episode that wasn't a good fit, but I thought he was a good fit on Voyager.
He mentioned one of the Voyager episodes as one of his favorites.
Yeah,
the one about the Q who wanted to die, which was a fascinating one.
Right, and and that was tied to him talking about like if Q's gonna die in season 2, we got to really talk about that.
Yeah,
like what does that mean? So, but they didn't.
So let's move on to our bits of the week. Mine is just one of the things that you don't expect to happen, but a lot of people don't remember that John Larroquette was in Star Trek 3, first of all, but he played one of the Klingons, one of the guys working for Christopher Lloyd, and he was the only Klingon that survived.
And his name was Maltz.
And so obviously someone who works on the show Night Court, which has been not rebooted, just revived. The Night Court is back. He's in his most famous role, playing Dan Fielding, except now he's a defense attorney instead of the prosecuting attorney. And they did a Comic-Con themed episode, and he dressed as a Klingon. The premise was he was only doing it because he was hiding from this woman who was a stalker, played by Wendy Malick, actually.
Oh, who did a voice on Lower Decks.
Yeah, another small world thing. But it got deeper. So I watched the episode, and he introduced himself as Maltz. He came up with the name, as if he came up with the name on the fly, because he had to think of a name. But when he originally is seen in the Klingon outfit, he goes something like, this seems oddly familiar. And at the end, he does a kind of a con scream, like Shatner.
So who wrote it? Do you happen to know?
Oh, I don't know.
Because maybe, maybe it's obviously a Star Trek fan, but.
Right. Because these cuts were so deep that only fans watching it. Because not only do you have to be a Star Trek fan, you have to remember that John Larroquette was in Star Trek 3, which is under a lot of Klingon makeup. A lot of people don't even remember that.
Right.
It's delightful.
That's funny.
It's worth watching this episode, even if you're not a fan of sitcoms, just to watch him and play Klingon again.
Good for him. I wonder if he is also a fan. Is he a fan?
I don't think so. I think he enjoyed it. He's talked about it positively. He joked about how he wanted to get, return, but I don't think he's a fan.
All right. Well, mine is very different from that. So this was Threshold Day, happened this week, the celebrated Voyager episode. And so there were a lot of different things going on social, but one of my favorites was from a site called the Vagina Museum, which is the world's first bricks and mortar museum dedicated to vaginas, vulvas, and the rest of the anatomy. So, and I happen to follow them, because why not?
Where is this?
I'm not sure, actually. It's not in New York. Anyway, so they had a whole thread about Threshold because they decided that in advance of Threshold Day, they said, and I'm going to swear, so get ready, people who don't like swearing. It said, we aim to answer a burning question. Did Paris and Janeway fuck? If so, how did they fuck? And then they got into a whole thread about amphibians and salamanders and genitals and eggs and how they did it. When Janeway released her eggs, Paris would have released sperm over them. Like this whole long, detailed, accurate thread. And then at the very end, they say, thank you for reading. We're sorry. And they call them space abomination babies.
So they're basing this entirely on as if they were just salamanders, Earth salamanders,
named Janeway and Paris.
Okay,
like Tom Paris would have wafted pheromones at Janeway. Then the two of them would have engaged in some dance moves. Anyway, it's all excellent, and it was my favorite thing that I saw that day.
Someone's gonna have to animate that, do a whole comic book.
So good. So we'll put a link to that.
That is different for sure.
Last week it was the hugging quiz. This time it's the Vagina Museum.
By the way, I got Saru. By the way, I did the quiz and I got Saru.
And would it describe a hug that you would like to get?
Of course. I've gotten that hug, except he wasn't in the Saru makeup.
Was it like a Doug hug, the Saru hug? Is it the same?
No, I think it's even more, warm and cuddly, if that's even possible. So
I like some people, I've seen people not getting the people that they wanted, but I gotta say, I'm still happy with my results. I'll take that Cisco hug.
Well, who wouldn't? That's it for another week of All Access Star Trek. Next week, I'm hoping to have good audio from going to the Saturn Awards and talking to Star Trek people on the red carpet, and maybe Lee Majors. Who knows?
And Lindsay Wagner. Don't forget Lindsay Wagner, my hero.
Yeah.
She's the one I love. Oh, I love her.
Goodbye.
Bye.